Hey guys, welcome back to another Weird Wednesday. I'm Ashers, and this is.
Pat O.
And also.
Adam.
Oh my gosh, just Adam. No, we're gonna. No, it's okay. That's great. You did a great job.
It's like Cher.
Just yes. I buy that. Oh my god, guys, we have got another guest. You guys really were on top of it when you were giving guest suggestions, and we've got many more people to have on in the future. But this has been a lot of fun talking to everybody.
Has this all been from the suggestion pool?
Every single one of them. Yeah.
I thought it was like a Midwestern theme because everybody's been from
everybody. I know, right? No,
the Midwest. Yeah.
I mean, it might be. Maybe we have a lot of Midwestern people, or maybe it's just that Midwesterners are extra weird. So there's plenty of us to have on.
Sure.
But no, guys, this week we have Adam from the Pine Barrens Institute. What founder is that?
Yeah.
The Lord of the Pine Barrens Institute.
the occasional operator, I should say.
Yeah. Well. No, Adam is actually a great friend of our friends, Emily and Tobias Whalen, right? You guys are all like, that's your group, right?
Yeah, we only live like 20 minutes or so away from one another, and we actually stumbled upon each other by chance through Tumblr, because when I started doing stuff, I was posting stuff and I was tagging it Wisconsin and Midwest and stuff. And then I saw people reblogging stuff that they were doing, and they were tagging Wisconsin and stuff. So I reached out to them like, hey, whereabouts are you? Because I'm here too. And it turned out they were in Madison at the time. So I was like, holy crap, like I actually know someone close. And then, for the past few years now, I've been going out like investigations, hikes, meeting up, just building this little weird circle.
That's awesome.
And, it's been fantastic.
That's a great love story right there. I like that. That's amazing. I had no idea. I thought you guys were like, maybe you had grown up with one of them or something. I mean, because you guys were, in such a close proximity to each other. That's really cool. I love that. Wow. Very
power of the internet.
You know what? Sometimes it's good. We're there. Well, let's go ahead. We'll talk about you know what? Actually, Pat, how was your weekend? I almost didn't ask you how your weekend was.
Oh my God, I was gonna let it go because we have a guest on, so that was perfectly fine. Honestly, I mean, my weekend was spent like the two things that kind of off the top of my head took up the most like mental bandwidth was number one, editing the footage from the Hidden Marietta Paranormal Expo.
The one in Missouri?
Yes. No. Ohio.
Oh,
right?
There you go. Yeah.
I finally got around to editing that footage Saturday night. It was an interesting time. I hadn't cut anything for like a while. And I actually used my desktop PC. So I used like the program I have on there, which is like a Adobe Premiere Pro knockoff. But once I got it going, and I think it turned out like okay. It was like I probably spent 2 hours uploading all my drivers and getting like everything sorted, and then another 2 hours actually cutting it. And then by that point I was done. I was like, ah, fuck it. But yeah, so that was this weekend. And then I feel like I talked to Adam on Twitter for a while.
Yeah. You guys did make fast friends.
That was like the other thing this weekend that felt like it was show associatable. My kid played a basketball game. I don't know, like it was just, it was kind of a bummer weekend. I'm feeling good, but it's fucking cold out, so it's like you don't do anything, and this winter just needs to fucking end. Spring needs to get here so I can go out and do shit.
Yeah, I agree.
Nancy.
Okay, I can relate. We had a huge snowstorm, so that was wonderful. So everybody was stuck inside, but that's okay. But I feel it very, very uneventful. Adam, did you do anything eventful this weekend?
Not a single thing.
Wonderful. Midwesterners, guys, we're super exciting lives here.
I just want it to be like 10 degrees warmer, and like I want to go see Jackass, and like I want to go out and like trust me, I have the motivation there. It's just then you go outside and it's like freezing. You're like, ah, fuck it.
You're like, I'm
You
gonna
know.
go back. That's how it is. Like you gotta dig your car out of the snow and whatever. It's just it's not a good time. I agree. I don't recommend
Yeah.
it.
I can
Um,
say it is the perfect weather though, to watch those like really bad UFO and alien documentaries on Amazon Prime.
oh yeah,
Recommend some.
absolutely.
Recommend some.
I watched one called, I believe it was just called UFO, but it was about from the first reported sighting, which gave it the term flying saucer, up until about 2015. It was just the timeline of major events.
Uh-huh.
Really well done. But then I watched Chariots of the Gods. Um, I think there was one called like UFO Declassified, and it was about how the moon wasn't like real
Oh
and
god.
things like that. It
Oh
just
shit.
kept getting weirder and weirder, and I was just like, you know what, this is what I'm doing all day.
So what do you mean the moon's not real?
About how NASA, like edited out the alien bases on it, and
Oh, okay.
how it's not actually just a floating chunk of a former planet, but it's like an alien base to monitor us and stuff like that.
Well,
It was
that's what Moonfall's about. I want to go see that this weekend too. But hey, spoiler alert! If but that's what that movie's about. It's a hollow moon, and it's actually a spaceship driven by an AI, and the AI wakes up because of something that we do on accident, and it's trying to fall into the earth or some shit. I don't know, but yeah, that's I guess that's something that's been going around a little bit.
It's going around. It's like a fucking disease.
No, but this idea that the moon is, I mean, the hollow moon theory, like that's not just that. There's not just like 2, 3 people saying that shit. Like it's.
Oh yeah, that's been. I mean, well, I guess you're right. It's been more popular lately. It's been around. There's been. I'm pretty sure for as long as there's been a moon, we've kind of been like, what is that thing?
Well,
What does it
here's
do?
the thing, and I almost wanted to do a whole episode on this, and I don't think we got to it. I don't know if I actually got to it in the because didn't we do a moon landing episode?
We did the moon landing. I know. Yeah, I
Okay.
know what you're going to talk about. You did
Sorry,
talk
I'm
about
back.
it a
I'm
little
back
bit.
on drugs again, so I'm fucking my mind's all over the place. Taking edibles to go to sleep at night, so my mind's out the fucking window. But there's cave paintings and shit, and there's artwork that we found that depicts a night sky pre-moon. They call it pre-lunar civilization. Right now, it could just be when they were doing the cave painting, they didn't put the fucking moon in. All
Right.
right. But some people see that as evidence that there was a time in human existence where
But there
there
was no
was no
moon.
moon,
Right.
right? And they bring up the fact that something about women's periods have something to do with it. Like animal periods don't sync up to the moon, but the fucking women, like humans, do or something. There's a whole list of like corroborating evidence supposedly, and it has and they talk about the way that like life developed. The overwhelming majority of life developed on this planet without the pull of like the lunar cycles and shit, and that humans are different because we came, I don't know, whatever, man. It's probably all bullshit anyway. But interesting stuff to read. And that's something I just kind of came across recently. So that's been
Maybe
kind of like a
we'll,
minor fascination of mine lately. So I might have to
maybe we'll
check that
talk
out.
about the moon like that. And but no, very interesting because like the title. If I saw something titled just UFO, I'd be like, and then I see something titled Chariot of the Gods. I'd be like, oh, that sounds awesome.
Well, that was a book by
Um,
somebody too. I think it was a really famous book.
yes. It
Yeah.
was. I don't remember by who, but no. I mean, I typically, but Adam's saying that the UFO one was the better of the two. Well, I guess maybe if you enjoy bad, then watch all the Amazon Prime documentaries, pretty much.
Right.
Pretty much any of them.
It's weird because they lure you in with like a very good star rating, but then when you click on it, they show the IMDb rating.
Oh
It's like 5
god.
stars on Amazon, 3 stars on IMDb, and you're like, I'm in for a treat.
You're like, this can either be really great or
All
really
that stuff
terrible.
is bullshit. I have some of my movies that are up on IMDb have like 9 out of 10 star ratings because they only have 12 ratings and it's by like all 12 cast members. And I love when a movie comes out and it's like I had one that I came up when 50 Shades of Grey came out because I'm like, look, Space Werewolf is ranked higher on IMDb than 50 Shades of Grey, and like I did like a split screen on with the 2 photos on Instagram, and it's like uh, 50 Shades has like 4 out of 10 stars, and Space Werewolf has 9.5. But I mean,
Can we
yeah,
like one of these events that we go to? Can we screen Space Werewolf?
Of course, you could. I recommend everyone starts their day by watching it. Why wait
It's
till
got
an
a
event?
9 on IMDb or whatever. That's awesome. Wow.
Higher rated than Fast and the Furious 3 Tokyo Drift. I don't know what to say.
That's awesome. Okay, well, I will go ahead and I'm going to share some news. You guys want to hear some news?
Yeah.
Very, very,
Yes.
very cool stuff. Last week we had talked about this Wimbledon Park lake monster picture. And at the time there wasn't a bunch of information available. And so I had put the picture out as an advertisement for the show saying, "Hey, I'm looking for the person that took this picture." Now I was under the impression that a woman had taken the picture. Came out it wasn't a woman, it was some guy named Eric. I'm not going to share his last name. But I did find Eric and I did speak with him about this lake monster that he caught a picture of. And he said, "No, it was just a tree branch. And I just smoked a joint. I thought it would be funny. I thought that nobody would really take it seriously, but people did." So I removed it off of social media. So I can confirm that the Wimbledon Park Lake Monster picture is just a tree branch floating around, and some stoner took a picture of it. So I thought that was a cool update to share. Pat, you got any thoughts on the?
No, I mean, kind of a bummer, right? It would have been
Yeah,
cooler if it was real, but
I mean, and that's kind of what we were saying last episode was that if, we needed to know, because I mean, it could, I mean, it looked very much like just a tree branch, like most lake monster pictures do. We needed the anecdotal evidence to go with it. What was the story behind it? Was it moving in the water? Things like that. Which was why I wanted to kind of find the person. But no, he was. I mean, he really could have gotten away with just saying yes, that was something weird, and that was it. But good on him for not.
It technically it still can be, because if you want to apply some of the more out there theories of lake monsters, there are those people who believe that they can camouflage like chameleons and
Oh,
appear
God.
as logs.
You're right.
So it still could be something.
yeah, he could have been high and not really understanding what he was capturing. I don't. What do you think? Do you think there should be any kind of repercussion as a hoaxer? Because, like, here's the thing. Yeah, this guy kind of came out and he made a joke out of it and blah 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 blah. But like, did anyone stop and be like, "You're a fucking dick"? You know what I mean? Number one, and then number two, like, who do you think is more likely to create a piece of hoaxed media? Somebody that has no ties to the paranormal community, like some like rando outsider that's just like, you know what? He just hears somebody say Sasquatch or hears someone talk about a Wendigo at a party and thinks, I'm going to go fake that next weekend, right? Or is it someone that's like super into the lore and like understands these things and then decides to go like hoax media, right? And then, like, I don't know, like the whole thing. I think the fact that like this guy was a hoaxer. Like, let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about that kind of mentality of the
Sure.
people that do that, right?
Sure.
Because that's what a lot of this either this shit is real or this shit is hoaxed. And yeah, I guess there's the third option, which is like people unknowingly take like photographs or videos of things that they think are real, and then it ends up just being mistaken
Well,
identity.
right. I mean, I think obviously, I think when it comes to physical media, I agree that it's either real or hoaxed, and I think that probably misidentified things. Well, it just depends on what it is. I suppose I'm not going to break apart every single piece of evidence with this guy. After talking to him, I genuinely think that he was just some dude, bro. And I think that he probably was high and he saw a tree branch and thought, huh, that looks like a lake monster, and took a picture of it, posted it online, joking, like, oh, look, a lake monster. I don't think he really meant to fool anybody. That's what he says. He didn't mean to fool anybody. He said, but the news took it. His post started blowing up. He just posted it on his Facebook and it got really big. And then the news had started to report on it. So he actually contacted one of the news stations that reported on it, and he gave the story. He said, no, it wasn't real. It was a tree branch. I just thought it was funny. So
Yeah.
You
So
want
he.
to
I'm
know
sorry.
something funny?
yeah.
Talking about hoaxes. I'm actually tied to a Bigfoot hoax in Wisconsin, inadvertently tied to it.
Oh, so you hoaxed something.
No, I didn't hoax it. I actually
Okay.
made like a fake flyer, and I posted it on my own personal website, clearly stating, if a flyer was made, it would probably look like this for if a Sasquatch was seen in the woods. Someone took that image and posted it as fact. And it spreads around every now and again, stating that the Wisconsin DNR has put out an alert for a Bigfoot in the Kettle Moraine and to follow these steps. And it blows up like at least twice a year. Last year, the Wisconsin State DNR actually had to address the issue. And I had to contact the state to tell them, like, I'm the one who did this. I've never meant for this to be a problem. Someone stole this from my website and cut off all markings that says that I did this. And it's had a life of its own for the past like 3 years.
That's really fun. Well, so you relate to this Eric guy that took this tree branch picture then.
Yeah, because once you put it out there, it's like you can't stop it. All you can say is I didn't mean for it to happen, but if you go searching for it, it'll link back to me. So it's like I'm not the hoaxer. I was inadvertently brought into it, that other people created the hoax based off something I did.
Yeah, both of those are pretty innocent, though. I think there's probably another group of people that like are a little bit more
straight up hoax things.
Yeah, like, you know what I mean? Like, that are more like
the Georgia Bigfoot body. Does anybody know? Okay, Adam knows what I'm talking about. Those guys, they very much, I mean, they were going to get caught. I mean, especially trying to sell it. I don't know what they were thinking.
I checked Crypto Mundo every day when that news was breaking to figure out what was going on.
Yeah.
And I remember like the pandemonium online about what was going to happen. And then it was like, oh, you got to buy tickets to the reveal. And immediately it's like, okay, this is when it comes crashing down. This is all fake.
Yeah. I was like, because they had shared that initial picture and you're like, well, maybe it is real. It's like, there's no way. Every day. No, I was in the same boat. Every morning I woke up. That's what I did. I checked Cryptomundo.
Well, it's because they put like, it was the fake costume, but they put like real animal entrails in it, like real eyes, real tongue and stuff sticking out.
Yeah,
so, and it was blurred.
It had like dentures. Yeah. Yeah.
It was blurred just enough too, where you could not like fully make it out, but it was that uncanny valley feeling where you're like, something is not right, but I can't pinpoint what it is.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Super exciting stuff back in the day.
What was their ultimate goal?
That's a good question.
I think to just make money.
I think it was just to make money.
And how would they have made money?
Because they set up a website for it where they were going to reveal it and show the whole thing online, kind of like a pay-per-view type thing where you had to buy access to it.
Yeah.
Oh, I know you literally just said that, but like, sorry.
Maybe we'll do a show about it one day. Cause it was, I mean, it was a big thing at the time. It was all just things in general at that time in cryptozoology were strange because right at the same time that was happening, you had like the Erickson project happening, which was, another daily, I got to check this thing. And, things just got very odd for a minute. But it was a lot of news. But then what's his name? Tom Biscardi then went on. And then Rick Dyer went on. They're like, well, yeah, that wasn't real, but we know where real ones are, and we'll tour you and we'll take you out to where these things are. And it's like, and that, obviously they were lying still, but they tried. But yeah, I think that, with those people, they were trying to make money. They sold, I mean, how they were found out was because they sold the body, and the person that bought it, and I think they I don't know. I think they bought it for like $50,000 or something like that.
Oh my God. That's
yeah. They discovered after it was, thawing later that night, that because it was frozen and it was, they had poured water and stuff in there to keep it frozen, I guess. And like a big freezer.
Well, they were trying to emulate the Minnesota Iceman.
The Minnesota Iceman,
but they did not have like the cooler and the what was needed to like keep it fully cold. So like they were literally just pouring bags of ice onto this thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, when the Iceman was being viewed, Heuvelmans and Sanderson, were looking at it with like pieces of glass on the top of it. So they couldn't get close to it. Like this thing was just in a cooler.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. And it was very, very much Georgian, backwoods folk. I shouldn't say that. One of the guys was a police officer. I remember that. Maybe both of them were even. I know one was for sure. But yeah, no, it was very primitive. And so I guess what they hadn't bet on was that they were going to unthaw it. I don't know why, but
Well, at that
that's
point, you got the money. Who cares?
right, exactly.
I
So
mean,
I don't
it's a
know.
one-time scam. You're not. It's nothing that you can repeat over and over again.
Right,
But you're going to get
right.
that. But you're going to get that first 50 grand, or you're going to get whatever the website ticket sales are.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess
Well,
it's a good scam, but I think my original thing was that with something kind of as I don't want to say backwater because that makes it sound like hickish, but I guess as an underground field, as like this as cryptozoology is, that like for you to know enough to convincingly create a fake, you almost have to be so ingrained in society that you're peers with the people that you're ripping off. And that's what seems the most like, I guess, like, and I don't want to say evil, but just like in bad taste of it all. Like I understand this dude with the branch and the
right.
River was a dude, bro. He wasn't. But like, and maybe these guys that created this thing and sold it, they were just cops that heard about the story and put some shit together. But some of these people that also folks that hoax these videos, be they UFO stuff or cryptozoology stuff, it feels more like nefarious to me when it's like, dude, like you're muddying the waters by creating false content to confuse and trick your peers. You know what I
I
mean?
agree with
Like,
that. There's a really good book, and it is called what's it called? I think it's called The Trickster and the Paranormal. And it's a really good book, and it kind of showcases some of these people who not only like lie and tell, because Facebook is a cesspool of people that that lie about their experiences. And when you're on these groups, you got tons of people that come out with these huge claims, but no evidence ever. And but it kind of explains it in a way that, like, basically these people are just like larping. It's like they're larping.
uh,
And
you mean you're schizophrenic, or I mean, there's
no, 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 no. They know that they're lying. But and then they'll hype each other up with their pictures of their bushes and their camouflage dogmen and things. And you know, they'll hype each other up as if they're not lying. See, Adam knows exactly what I'm talking about. I know you
Well,
do.
I'm laughing at they hype each other up with pictures of their bushes.
I mean, that's how I pump my
Uh,
buddies' tires,
Yeah,
right? Like, you know what I mean? If someone's
that's
having a
what
bad
makes
day,
sense.
if your bro texts you at lunch, he's like, I don't know if I can make it through lunchtime, bro. And you're like, hey,
Send him a picture of your bush.
check this out, man. Look what you got, right? Just a
Well,
couple, just a
it's true.
couple dudes showing fucking
Some
right.
bush. Yeah, that's
That's what
like I
Macho Man
said.
would have done.
That's what, everybody needs to
Oh
aspire
yeah,
to be like Macho Man.
oh yeah, dig it, dig it.
That's a clear goals. Anyway, I haven't even gotten to the most interesting news story yet. This was just a little update, so let me. I'm just gonna put this one down for now, but we'll talk about some of those things at some point. Um, this one's really cool. This one's got me interested, but I didn't make it through all 120 pages yet. But um, so there was newly released government documents from out of Brazil that said that between 2013 and 2016 there was an indigenous tribe that was being frequented by, well, they're saying UAPs, but UFOs here. And not just that, they weren't just being visited by these UFOs, they were also being attacked by these UFOs. And it's very interesting. So I'm gonna butcher some of these names, but a ufologist in out of Brazil who runs a website called uapbrazil.com. He had actually went ahead and filed his Freedom of Information paperwork and had gotten these documents, and it's over 120 documents of testimonials and video footage, and of these UFOs. Now, They started seeing them. This tribe started seeing them starting in 2013. But in 2014, there were reports that the UFO had actually kind of gotten closer to the ground than it had before and started shooting lasers at the tribes people. And so that sounds weird, right? I mean, that's wild. That wasn't the only time that it had happened. They had shot lasers again in 2016 at them, putting this man in the hospital. He lived, but that was interesting. What's really interesting about this, though, is that it wasn't just the indigenous people that were seeing these things. There was a woman there by the name of, I think it's Paula Caleres, probably butchering names because I'm white, but she's an anthropologist who was actually doing her doctoral studies there on the tribe, and she had seen these things. Um, so the tribe then goes on to ask for help from the National Indigenous Foundation, who in turn had contacted the government. But they hadn't really taken it seriously until a second anthropologist by the name of, I think it's Carolina Comanduli. I think that's how you say it. When she came forward and said, I also saw these things. And then they had started really digging more into it. Now, I don't know if these things have now stopped visiting the village or what has happened, but now there's been more of a heavy government presence in the area. But they have started looking more into it. So the video footage and stuff was taken by Paula, the original anthropologist, and she had put it out there. And they are, I mean, initially they're just really weird lights in the sky, but then they move very erratically. And then there's different videos of them kind of closer and farther away and things like that. Very interesting stuff. Again, there's over 120 pages, video footage of not just the UFOs, but the testimonials from some of the tribes people that you can see on the website, which I will link below. So, thoughts on that? Anybody got thoughts on that?
Aliens freak me out. Like
Same. I'm so scared of them.
when and I've gotten into Tobias, and I have gotten into quite a few discussions about aliens. And basically what it comes down to is like, I don't care why aliens are here. I don't care what they're doing. Any of that. The one thing about that, I just want to know what they look like inside their ships, but I also don't want to be anywhere near them because
Inside
it's
the
just
ship.
just like if you were outside and you just like saw one, and kind of like the Betty and Barney Hill incident,
Oh,
where
yeah.
like they could see him on the inside, like I would just kill me right then and there, because
Yeah, yeah.
I'm done. I don't want to do anything else after that.
I am also very terrified of, and people are really surprised to find that because most of the stuff that I do is kind of more alien heavy, really. And, but I'm scared to death of them. I really am, just because there's nothing I can do. They can do whatever they want with me, and there's nothing I can do about it. So, I mean, and they really freak me out. And, but, I still find them very interesting.
It's that weird drawn to what scares you type thing. It's like
Yeah.
you don't want to look at it, but there's that part that's like, just look as long as you can type of thing.
Yeah.
But it's like it makes you feel uncomfortable and like kind of disgusting, like you're in a situation where like if anything decides to go wrong, there's nothing you can do about it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. I agree.
I think part of the reason that we're so inclined to transpose benevolence on top, like on them, is because the situation almost requires that. Otherwise, it becomes very terrifying very fast. We are so overmatched, outpowered, outgunned, out tech. They got better
Yeah.
technology. They got supposedly these fucking psychic abilities. I mean, who knows what? They're shapeshifters. They can move. They can move through matter. All this stuff. They have a litany of superpowers, and they have fucking spaceships, and there's nothing that stops them. There's
Right.
absolutely nothing that can
They
stop
could
them.
blow our shit to bits and that'd be it.
Or
See,
they could fucking come through our walls every night into our bedrooms and fucking do whatever they want with us. So we need to believe that at the very least they are benevolent, if not good natured, if not maybe even out to help us. Right? We need because I mean, think about, because otherwise it's the relationship that a scientist, a human scientist, has with a rat or with a chimpanzee or something. You know, that animal is going to get treated as well as that scientist's experiments and his temperaments will allow, right? So we're really screwed if these things are real,
Yeah.
and if it's stuff like this. And I'm surprised we don't see more stories like this. And I think what's interesting is that this sounds credible. It's got great third party witnesses. It's got it was a long period of time. It looks like it was documented by legitimate agencies and stuff. What I want to, but it's just such a head scratcher because it's like they went to Brazil to fuck with these people. Like what? Like
Yeah, I'm
they
curious about that. I know that a nearby tribe had also reported seeing the UAPs, and they thought they were drones. So one of the tribes people actually had a gun and started pointing it at it. That's the guy that got shot by the fucking laser beam and sent to the hospital.
Well, I mean, you bring up a very good question. Maybe it was a terrestrial zone drone. You know what I mean? Like this is one of those stories, and maybe I'm wrong. I was trying to read along with it while you were talking about it. I found it on Mysterious Universe. But was there any sightings of creatures, or was it just craft? Because a
Um,
lot of these like sightings that are purely craft, you got to wonder how much of it is terrestrial aircraft, you know what I mean, or like secret space program stuff, or just drones, you know what I mean. If you don't see an alien, then it's not an alien, you know.
maybe I think what makes it an alien is the fact that it's performing maneuvers that we can't, that aren't
Well,
the
that
things
you
that
can't. But what the fuck can you do? I can. See you do a cartwheel. Let's start with that, and then we'll talk about maneuvers you can't
well,
perform.
no, that's not that's not the same thing. Whatever. I think you put too much faith in the government's technologies, but that's just me. That's just me. I don't. I don't think that I mean, yes, there's things that we can do that aren't disclosed, but there's not a lot, I don't believe. And I think that most of the science is out there and it's available. It's just not readily available. It's just not very easy to find. And whatever it is that we're seeing in these crafts, it's not something that we can do. Otherwise, we'd be doing it. It'd be very lucrative for us to be able to have these crafts that, can get you basically from point A to point B and nothing, and that's pretty much what they do. So why wouldn't we have them available to the masses? It would make a hell of a lot, it would make good money. And we know that military and government, and they love money, and that's really all they're good at is signing a paycheck. So I don't know.
But we don't know
Um,
that these things are piloted with someone inside them. I mean, just because you can get a drone to do like anti-gravity shit, or like go super fast and stop on a dime and all that stuff, doesn't mean you can do the same thing with human cargo, you know.
I suppose that's a good point.
So these could be unmanned drones, and like that's all this is, and they're running drills with this indigenous tribe because who else are you gonna fuck with? You know what I mean? Like it's actually real. It's really good. Like if you were trying to do like guerrilla warfare or something, or like I don't know, pacification. I don't fucking know.
Sure.
Have you ever heard of the Fermi paradox?
Uh,
Yeah,
no.
that there's so isn't no. That's I'm thinking of the Drake question. All right, what's the Fermi paradox?
Well, the Fermi paradox, the definition of it's the conflict between the lack of clear, obvious evidence for extraterrestrial life and various high estimates of their existence. And it breaks it down in all these multiple different ways for the reasons why we haven't discovered anything, or, if we have, it's because of these reasons. But it breaks it down extremely well, but it's also very like terrifying when they start listing the reasons for and against encountering alien life, and it just like makes the whole phenomenon that much like deeper. If if you have like a weekend or something or a few hours to kill, definitely check it out. And like,
What's that?
We got a podcast. I mean,
Right.
you want to start explaining it? I mean,
No, it's okay. No, no, no. We're not gonna make you get into all that. But no, yeah, no, I have heard of this. But it is worthy to look into. That's something I haven't. Gosh, I haven't looked at that in a long time. There's so much, you guys, with all this stuff. But no, I think that would be a good thing to talk about on the show.
so just some of the quick basic points of it. It's like alien life is already here, but it's just not acknowledged. Their unwillingness to communicate, the discovery of extraterrestrial life is too difficult. It breaks down like sociological explanations, economic explanations, evolutionary explanations, all that. Plus just the chance, like because of the size of the universe, like why would they be coming here?
Right.
And it's definitely interesting. If you're interested in aliens, it's one thing to definitely check out.
Something to look into for sure. Yeah, I think it's I mean, and I think that's the question now, is more so not, and we talked about this before. It's not really so much do aliens exist, but now it's more, do they come here? And I think that's now shifted. Like, that is now the $1,000,000 question. There's still a lot of people that don't believe aliens exist at all somehow. But that's, I guess, if you want to be wrong, you can. But that's, I think that is a really good, yeah, maybe we should do a show about it. We've talked about doing like alien species and stuff like that before on the show. We should probably do that. I'm gonna add it to the list anyway. Back to this whole situation. I guess you're right. I mean, if it were a type of military aircraft, if they're gonna fuck with anybody, I guess make it a tribe in the middle of Brazil or something.
mhm.
Brazil has a lot of weird stories though that come out of it in general. I don't know. I mean, maybe there's something to that. Maybe there's not. Any like weird video that you see on the internet that you can't like disprove at all, it's always like, oh, it was filmed in Brazil, and it's like, oh, okay.
Well, it's a big ass piece of South America, and it's not necessarily a shithole. It's pretty well developed, so you got people with camera phones.
Well, right. Right. And so, I mean, it made sense, years ago that, it was an easy target for that kind of stuff. I'm not going to get too much into it, but I mean, there's, racial reasons why we've kind of dubbed places like that extra weird, but I don't know. It's just something to think about. But I'm going to read it. I'm going to read all 120 pages and watch all the stupid videos, and I'll tell you guys what I think. But it is very interesting. But I'll link the website below it. It's all translated in English. That's really nice that they did that. So very exciting. I mean, the anthropologists though are seeing it too. So I don't know. That's cool. Anyway, all right. So that was all I had for the news this week. Let's talk about our guest, right? Shall we?
Yeah.
Yes, let's talk about me.
Let's talk about you. I know, right? He's probably over there feeling terrible. Like, oh, I thought I was coming on here to talk about me. No. So Adam,
just so everyone knows, that's a joke. That's a joke, by the way. I hate
guess you're
talking
right.
about myself.
People might not know that you're joking, but you know how the internet is. So what do you do? How do you describe yourself and what you do and how you're into this?
I would describe myself as a chronicler of the lesser known Midwest weird stories. I operate the Pine Barrens Institute, and what it is, it's the focus on bringing out some of the lesser known bizarre historical accounts, primarily from Wisconsin, but also the surrounding Midwest. The stuff that you kind of have to dig for. And along with that, giving, a deep dive into the history of the area in which it took place in.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. And so why the Pine Barrens? I mean, obviously, people should know what the Pine Barrens are, but if not, do you want to explain that?
Yeah. So what it is, when this originally started, like the main focus of it was on cryptozoology, because that's like my first big passion, as a kid growing up and stuff. So we started with cryptozoology, but folklore is such a huge part of cryptozoology and something that I really enjoy. So it's kind of the name is taken from one of the most recognizable creatures within cryptozoology, but also one of the most recognized pieces of American folklore, that being the Jersey Devil of the Pine Barrens. Mm-hmm. It's kind of that intersection between myth and legend. Um, so that was chosen as the name. Um, and from there, it's just kind of branched out to incorporate other things as well, not just cryptozoology. We deep dive into historical ghost tales, strange oddity stories, UFOs. Just it's pretty much grown to include anything really, as long as it takes place in the Midwest.
Okay, okay, and that's kind of the standard. Yeah, gosh, Pat, you're right. This was not on purpose that we had specifically Wisconsin guests on the show, but but Midwesterners. But no, it's fine. So, how did you get into this stuff to begin with?
The biggest two influences growing up were um, Leonard Nimoy's In Search of
Yeah.
and Unsolved Mysteries.
Wow.
Watching these, and especially In Search of, because that was at a time when this stuff was actually taken pretty seriously.
Sure.
So they would showcase these episodes with not in a light to make fun of it, or kind of put like a joking spotlight on it, like a lot of modern reality shows do. Like they'd actually bring in like the scientists and the doctors and stuff like that, and they actually invest talk about it in a way that you would learn something from it. And watching these people talk about this stuff, it was just enthralling as a little kid. And then you got Unsolved Mysteries, where it's talking about like the darker side of this, like I clearly remember the episodes involving Loch Ness Monster and Champ, and various UFO stories and hauntings and stuff, and it's just like it made such a big impact that it's like, I want to do this.
Were
Sure.
you of the age to have watched Sightings?
Yes.
Because that's one that I hear other podcast people. It's when people get asked that question, they talk about unsolved mysteries. Never really did it for me because the UFO stuff was very few and very far between, and I mean it was the content was there, but I felt like it was mostly like what Dateline does now about like murder mysteries or disappeared spouses or whatever. But yeah, man, Sightings was like pure mainlined paranormal stuff, and it was all like a little creepy and a little sinister. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like it was a little dangerous, and it's interesting to think that Sightings actually, and because we're close enough to where we probably had the same TV, but like Sightings predated X-Files by about 3 years.
Yeah,
And
because it came out, what, 91, 1990, 91, somewhere in there.
X-Files was like my when I was in 8th grade, so it would have been like 94.
Oh no,
And,
I'm talking about Sightings.
right,
Sightings came,
yeah,
yeah.
Sighting, because I know like the last 2 years of Sightings like overlapped with X-Files or something like that. But it's crazy to think, because I always think that Sightings would be after X-Files, but no, it was actually the other way around. Sightings kind of laid the groundwork and got that and created that interest, and then boom, we were able to have we were able to get X-Files out of it.
There was just something about seeing like hosts wearing like, they're dressed up in like suits and stuff, and they're talking about like aliens and ghosts and stuff. Like you don't see that anymore. It's
Yeah.
Yeah.
always people like decked out in like tactical gear for some reason, like
Yeah.
you're gonna arrest a ghost or something like that.
Oh
It's
my god, dude!
You're right.
Do
There's no
not
like,
get me started about fucking monster hunters, okay?
oh no, that's
but
past
it's
my
like
profession.
it had these shows back then had this air of credibility to them that was
Right.
it was really respectable. And now, like, they tried to reboot In Search of, and it doesn't capture that same essence that the original show had, because
Yeah.
it's got this light of the modern reality paranormal show is like tainted everything that has come
Yeah.
after it. And it's like it I don't know, you can't get into them. There's some about those classics that, because they were also still talking to people who made such a lasting impression in this field. Like I remember the Bigfoot episode, they're talking to Grover Krantz about it, and John Green, and you got Tom, I believe Tom Slick,
Oh yeah, Tom.
is a he I believe that's who it was, giving interviews and in search of and stuff. And it's like to see those people like in their prime when they were still like boots on the ground doing this, there's something extremely nostalgic about it.
Yeah, I agree. Now you get mountain monsters.
Yeah.
Which, don't avoid that one. But I agree. That is very interesting. Were you ever was it that you were curious about these things? Were you fearful of them as a young kid, or
I think being younger while watching it, it was that fear that, attracted me to it. Like,
sure?
because they were always on at night.
Yeah,
And that just added to it because, you already got the fear, is building. And then when it's like, when you find out what they're going to be talking about, and then also like those for In Search of, those dramatic reenactments and stuff where they actually would put a person in a costume, but a really pretty good costume, but like the quality of the video wasn't that good. So it made it feel more real.
yeah,
So, and like scared, but like I said earlier about the UFO and stuff, like you don't want to look, but you have to keep looking. And then from there, it was like, check out books from the library or book fairs, buy books and stuff like that. But a lot of it, once you get a few books, you're going to be reading the same stories over and over and over again.
sure.
So then it kind of like led me to start looking for stuff on my own.
Okay.
And it's like, ooh, I like doing this.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What kind of crossover do you think there is between the paranormal and cryptozoology crowd and the horror movie crowd? Like pretty much universal, right? Like
I'd assume so. Like I pretty much
because we were all weird kids that like to be scared, and that's something about that we kept embracing that.
Yeah,
Embracing
look
that
how many
fear.
Look how many people put like notable horror icons and stuff. How many of them will list like The Legend of Boggy Creek,
Yeah.
like in their top favorite, indie horror movies and stuff like that. It's like that was a major movie in that kind of opened this up to a more movie going audience, especially when they're talking to the people who are actually part of it and they're like, holy crap, this is real.
Yeah, most of us are like at minimum monster movie fans. A lot of us I noticed are really into kaiju and stuff like that. I think there's a huge overlay. I can tell you from experience. I mean, as somebody that likes both and is into both, it's a lot of a lot of overlay there. So I'd agree with that. I mean, why we end up growing up into the weirdos that then want to search it out. I couldn't tell you, but at least we do. I agree. When I initially started getting into my my Wendigo research, one of the first pieces that I'd read about it when I really got into it, one of the first pieces I had read about it was actually from you, Adam, about your misidentification of the Wendigo. Do you still hold that opinion?
Which article exactly? Because there's a few where people have sent me, and then there was like a deep dive into it.
It was a really good. Oh man, I wish I had pulled it out and thought to add this in here. I guess I didn't really even plan on asking. I don't really remember, but it was just basically about how like people had seen something, but it wasn't necessarily this like evil, spirit that they were seeing, in the woods. That it was probably misidentified. Even like you had mentioned Sasquatch possibly being, a reason why they were seeing this thing. And then you had actually talked about the stag-headed portion of it and how that was probably just misidentified deer or whatever.
Yeah, the stag-headed representation of the Wendigo is one that it's kind of irritating a bit because it's that pop culture design of it that is kind of that flooded the mainstream now, where people think it's like, oh, the Wendigo is like a monster, when it's not actually a monster. It's it's a result of madness and cannibalism,
right?
But it's kind of like, I don't know. And then people like starts branching off from that, and like people are like, oh, what you're actually talking about is the rake, and the rake is a subspecies of Wendigo. And it's just like this flood of creepypasta that is kind of ingrained itself within this as well, where you really have to dig to figure out like if what you're looking at is actually real or if it was made up. Because some of this stuff, it's like, if you just have an hour or something and you're just looking around and you actually want to solve it, you can figure out when it started. Like it's not hard, but people don't want to do that because they like to just, take stuff on the internet at face value, and then they spread it and it just grows more and more and more.
Mhm.
And the Wendigo is unfortunately one of those ones that has been victimized by
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating. It's kind of like the chupacabra. It's
Oh,
just
yeah.
like, it's lost now.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do to get it back.
Yeah. No, I think you're right about that. And it's unfortunate because then, and I've talked about it just in other places about how, like when the rake came out, it's unfortunate because the story got big and the guy who created the rake story made a website specifically for trolling, and it was to catalog the rake sightings that people were seeing. So somebody that probably could have seen a strange humanoid terrifying thing probably gets on the internet and looks that up, strange terrifying humanoid thing, finds the rake and goes, "Oh my god, that's what I saw." And now they have a legitimate sighting, and then they go on to say, "I saw the rake, I saw the rake." And it's like, ugh, well, how do you, an investigator, how do you pick that apart from, what's real and what isn't? And I guess at this point we're just kind of stuck dealing with it. But I agree, the Wendigo is one of those things. It's a very extremely misunderstood, and but I think that you were probably the first article that I'd came across that was ballsy enough to say that the Wendigo isn't a physical thing. And so good for you.
Thank you. It's actually interesting because like you can also look at the Wendigo where it's at now. And as a result, it's almost like it's that and other things like it. It almost created like a subcategory of cryptozoology where it's no longer cryptozoology, which is the search for undiscovered flesh and blood
Animals.
animals.
Yeah.
It's now like paracryptozoology, where
Yes.
things that are not in any way, shape, or form undiscovered animals, like the two camps like need to be separated because you got the flesh and blood people who believe that nothing possesses any magic, like it's
Right.
literally just an animal we have not found yet. And then you got the ones that these animals do possess magic or they're paranormal or anything like that. And I don't think you can do both. Like you kind of have to pick a side almost. It's come to that point.
Yeah.
But I think there should be a clear distinction between the two. Like if someone says I'm a cryptozoologist, it's like, well, what kind are you?
Right. Yeah. You kind of have to ask at that point. I agree. And that's so we just did, I guess I forgot to plug my own. Let me shill myself on my own show here. I just came out with a new show, Monster Radio with Ryan Tremblay, and it is specifically cryptozoology based. The first episode though is about the Wendigo. And the point of it is because technically the Wendigo is not a cryptid, guys. It's just not.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't fall into the guidelines. And, we kind of get into talks about how calling it a cryptid is very disrespectful to cryptozoology, because the reason why Heuvelmans and Sanderson created cryptozoology was so that it could be taken seriously and it could be deemed as credible. And it was to create guidelines, clear guidelines as to what we were looking at.
Exactly.
So we're kind of, shitting on that idea by then just going, well, this doesn't fit anywhere else, so I'm just going to throw it into cryptids. And that doesn't
Right.
work.
And if you want to piss like a lot of people off too, like that also applies. The Flatwoods Monster is not a
It's not a
cryptid.
cryptid.
Aliens,
Mothman.
Mothman is not a cryptid. If
Yeah.
it was, it would be based on the original, first description of a giant bird.
Right.
That would be a cryptid.
Right.
Loveland frogmen would not be.
No.
Anything like that. The original description of the chupacabra being like an alien kangaroo lizard.
Yeah.
Those are all would be firmly based in paracryptozoology if you were
Right.
to categorize them. But if you're talking about, like Bigfoot, the flesh and blood Bigfoot, if you're talking about Thunderbirds, lake monsters, things like that, that would be within the cryptozoology flesh and blood camp.
Right.
Based off of, evidence, though, how long evidence has been taken to be gathered and categorized, for Loch Ness Monster and stuff like that, it's almost to the point where it can't be considered a cryptid anymore. Almost like it has to move to paracryptozoology because, like, at this point, you think that something more definitive should have been found. So there's these kind of hazy areas where it's like, when does something stop being and when does something go back into.
Sure.
So it's at a really interesting time. I
Oh
would
yeah,
say.
I agree with that. And and it's not saying that these things don't exist. That's not that's not what's being said. Not that people haven't seen these things or experienced these things or they're not having valid experiences. Just that things have certain names. And but yeah, I mean it is. And as somebody that dabbles in the folklore side of things, and Jersey Devil is another really good case in point. What happened during that, what was it, 1909 flap? Is that what it was? 1909 or 19
With the footprints.
well, it was, yeah, and everybody saw it, and it was
Well,
like
what's
30 people
fun is
executed or
when
something
you
like that.
start digging into those cases like that, where they have flaps across
Yeah.
multiple counties and in cities like that. If you start looking into the time period, a lot of them can be based off of. This also applies to like the airship flaps. The late 1800s, early 1900s. A lot of the time, what it was, if it was a slow news day, a newspaper would pick a neighboring county or town and write an article about them,
Oh yeah.
just as a joke, where the other town would then be put in a position with, do they either go along with the joke or do they say no, this didn't happen. But when they start seeing the sales numbers come in of people buying the paper at the time, they realize that this is a profitable way to make money. So they go with the joke, and they might pick another county or town and say that it went over there. And then that county has the same thing. And then before you know it, you have this flap of sightings that may have happened or they may have been completely fabricated. But somewhere along the line, a War of the Worlds type effect starts happening where people are like, no, I saw it. Like my neighbor saw it. And then it takes on a life of its own. And then, it becomes folklore at that point, and it gets ingrained into the public consciousness. The origins of it, get cloudy, murky. People are like, no, that didn't happen. No, it did happen. And then you're just kind of left to guess for yourself.
Mhm.
The Jersey Devil, the origin story, which everyone knows, it's not true. There was never a the Leeds woman. I can't remember her name offhand. She didn't actually exist. It's believed that Benjamin Franklin had a hand in creating the Jersey Devil origin story when he was putting the Leeds Family Almanac out of business
Oh.
to make the Poor Richard's Almanac. As a result, he kind of called out the owner of the Leeds Almanac and kind of gave him a negative, devilish portrayal, and also used like their family crest, which kind of showed a creature which looked like a devil. And from there, their reputation was kind of ruined. And as a result, this story cropped up.
Wow.
So
Franklin was a catty bitch.
right. So not saying what people weren't seeing anything, because they could have been seeing something,
Sure.
and because they knew the legend of the Jersey Devil, like, oh, that's what we saw. Was it that? Don't know, but it all kind of folded in on that, and now we are where we are, and everyone knows,
Right.
about the Jersey Devil. Same thing with like the devil's footprints. Oh, I saw them on my roof, and they went here and they stopped. Yeah, something made those, but how much of the story that you're retelling is true?
Right.
And did you just walk outside and see a few footprints and you kind of embellish, like they went up over my house and they went through my barn and then they went through my, our kitchen and stuff like that? Or did they just kind of cross the backyard in your neighbor's yard and you're like, that's weird?
Yeah, well, and this is why me personally, I'm just not, which is kind of a hot take. I'm not the history person in my research team, because I like to talk to my witnesses. And I think that is a very important piece of the puzzle. And you can't talk to somebody that lived in 1900.
Oh, for sure. And I highly respect people that do that. The modern cases are so difficult to research because of all of the stuff you have to put up with, the hoaxing and
Oh, yeah.
The creepypastas and stuff like that. That's why I love focusing on the historical ones where you have a clear story, you have records, you can go to the library and learn about the area. So you can usually get a pretty solid picture from beginning to end, and at the end have, you know, a definitive result of this didn't happen or something happened here, but not like everyone says.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, but that's a good point. You know, that's my, you know, my historical person, she's a big skeptic. And so it makes a lot of sense because, you know, she is the one always kind of tracking those things and finding the beginning and end. So when she raises her eyebrow and goes, I don't know, this one's weird, you know, then I'm like, oh, is it? It gets me excited.
I think something happened.
Yeah.
Well, oh, there she is.
Did I leave?
Yeah.
Just for a second.
Oh, that's weird. I could hear you guys. Okay, well, I'm back now. Hi, guys.
Hey.
It was the government. They don't want me to talk about these things.
They don't want you to talk about Anne. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't want to talk about Anne. Yep. Well, okay. I guess I'll just continue. The audience most likely heard what I said, but it's okay. Did I? Am I back?
If there's any Men in Black on here, click twice for yes.
I don't. You can't hear me at all?
No, now we can.
Okay. All right. Now, okay. Should I just wait? What should I do? Should I keep talking?
I think you should complete your thought about Anne because it's been our audience has been dripping with anticipation.
I think our audience heard me talk about Anne. I think you guys didn't.
All right. Well, Adam will have to check the tape later.
We'll check it later. You know what?
Review the evidence.
You know what?
Watch
if
the
you
game
guys,
tape.
If it's just going to be a mystery. You know what? Anne is my personal cryptid. So if this is the way it goes, this is the way it goes. So I'm just going to leave it. Anyway. So what was I talking about? I was talking about Anne. That's right. All right. So Adam, what is probably the first weird story that you found yourself really engrossed in? I mean, you're talking about how you prefer the lesser known things. You know, what's the first one that you were, you know, kept you up at night, you know, digging in the details and maybe still keeps you up at night, trying to figure it out?
Oh man.
I know that's a very general question, but
I honestly think probably one of the first ones that like really captured my interest as a kid, I can say would probably be the Loch Ness Monster, simply because, you know, as a kid, seeing the surgeon's photograph plastered like on the front of a book and stuff like that, like just that image, it gets your imagination racing. So that led to like a really deep dive into just a variety of lake monsters. Now I'd have to say currently, I think one of the ones that sticks with me the most is actually a UFO story that I wrote about. It's called the Baker family UFO incident, or the Mellon, Wisconsin UFO flap of 1975. And there's just something about it. This UFO is reported to have landed in the front of the Baker family's home in Mellon, Wisconsin. And it was just sitting there for a few minutes to the point where, you know, the family actually went out to see it, and the father got close enough to it to hear something on the inside of it kind of banging like it had a hammer. And there was actually an open door, and he was going to look in the door, but his wife yelled at him to get away from it because his children were actually scared. They went inside to tell their mom, and she yelled at him to get away from it. So he reluctantly went back inside. But when he was inside, the thing took off. And it looks like she left.
Yeah, but I'm hanging. I'm here. So
okay.
Yeah.
So they went back inside, and there was a loud explosion, and they looked out the front window, and the thing was gone. So they called the local undersheriff, and the undersheriff came out, and, you know, there wasn't really any evidence. There was like some slight indentations in the ground. So all they could really do is, you know, tell them that, well, there's not really an emergency, but we believe you, because the family were pretty upstanding in the communities, and there was no reason for them to lie. So the undersheriff took the report. Later that night, he met up with some other uh, sheriffs from Mellon as well as some surrounding counties, and they were all just kind of talking that night about the strange calls they had, and they saw stuff in the sky which they reported as craft, bright lights, all that, and they actually went so far as to kind of chase them around the area, and there was multiple crafts that were described. Some of them were reported as even lighting up the area as bright as day, where you could read a newspaper. They never caught them, of course. They went towards Lake Superior and they vanished. The next day, though, the Baker family, the daughter, her name was Jane. She was 15 at the time. She was letting the dog out, and she was actually looking for evidence of the landing, and she saw them again. The craft was hovering kind of in the swampy area across from the house, and it was freaking the dog out really bad, where the dog took off, and she chased after it to make sure it was fine. And then the thing was gone again. It was described as being, the craft was described as about being like 6 foot high. It had a diameter of 12 feet, and it almost looked like a turtle, like the profile of a turtle. There was red and blue green lights around it. It was silver in color, and they couldn't really see any legs holding up the craft, but they did find, like I said, slight impressions. But the thing that really sticks in my mind, though, is how close Mr. Baker got to it, to the point where he was, like he said, he was almost able to look inside.
Wow.
He was so affected by it that he pleaded for his children. Well, his children also pleaded to one another to not talk about it to anyone at school. And Mr. Baker went down to the newspaper there and told them not to run the story, because he didn't want his family to be harassed or to people think they were crazy. And they didn't. They respect his wishes. They didn't run it, but word got out. J. Allen Hynek actually, looked into the case, and in search of, actually did an episode on it in season 1 about the whole thing, where they talked to the family. And that case is just burned into my head. And it's one that I kind of base all my other research kind of going forward, because you're left with, we don't know, but you got all these reputable people, just being straight up honest, but you're left with, all this can be is it's weird. It's something that can't be explained.
Sure. No, I think that's I think that's a really good case that, that makes a lot of sense. Have you found anything, in digging through it, that you feel like you maybe didn't connect before, or anything that you felt like could be related to this incident or these incidences in hindsight?
Not really, no. This was taking place during a time when Wisconsin was having a huge surge of UFO sightings. But what's interesting is, this one took place close to Lake Superior, and all the strange stories that come out from around the Great Lakes and stuff. It's interesting what types of weird things have been reported through the years around the Great Lakes.
Right. Yeah.
To hear these things, took off towards Lake Superior, where they then, vanished. I always find to be interesting.
And that's something that somebody, one of our mutuals had posted on Twitter. I can't remember who it was. Just about how they had mentioned like a whole bunch of weird stuff like had happened in the 60s, and there was like all this high strangeness that was happening, and I was like, and they're like, maybe there's something to that, and I was like, well, I used to think that too, until I realized that the 50s were also equally as weird, and so weren't the 70s, and so on, and then it just kind of got away from me, and I was like, maybe there's not something to that. I don't. Because it's like the more you kind of start looking into the void, the more it looks back, and you're like, this never really stopped, did it?
Right.
Because it doesn't, and I think that's a big misconception that people have, is they're like, oh yeah, you'd be like, oh, this happened in, for me in my area, it's the 1960s, and it's like, of course it was the 19, and it's like, but what does that mean exactly? Because
it's just, there just so happens to be, like someone who's very vocal and makes sure to put it out in front of people during that during that era, which
Yeah.
makes people think like this is the only time that it was happening.
Right.
You know, Keel was out there just, you know, with the ideas that he was talking about, like it got on people's radar and
Yeah.
they're like, well, maybe something is going on here. That's weird. But then you got, you know, like the 50s and stuff like that with Heuvelmans and Sanderson.
Yeah.
They weren't like being flashy about it.
No, they
They
weren't.
were recording just as many strange occurrences of mysterious animals and encounters, but they weren't being flashy. They were doing it from a scholarly point of view.
Yeah. Right, exactly. One of the questions I was asked at the recent Paranormal Expo was about whether or not I thought that, you know, how the Earth tilts on its axis every so often, if I thought that that had anything to do with any of this stuff. And I was like, I mean, we've looked into it, but you know, again, the idea here that I'm trying to tell you guys while I'm here today is that these things never ended. They never stopped and began anywhere. It's always been, and you
Right.
know that's just I think that's a big, you know, and it's a mistake I've made. I mean, I've done it. I've delved into it. You know, I map things and time and timelines, and you know that was my first theory was a timeline that I was working on that had started with the Roswell crash, and you know, that I found out how wrong I was because you just keep adding more. You're like, well, this predates Roswell. Well, this happened after the 1960s. Well, this happened after the 1970s, and it just doesn't. It gets away from you. So, you know, it's hard to say that there's a connection there or anything. I think that demographically there are connections. Would you agree that there are certain demographics that have more high strangeness than others?
I, you know, on a surface level type answer, I'd say yeah. It seems like certain areas are more prone for weird things to happen, but I think again, if you were to like spend time really digging into not just those areas, but the areas that bleed out from them,
Yeah.
just as many strange things will be reported there. A lot of the time, you know, for these historical ones, they may have happened in a certain location, but they're categorized in another larger area because, you know, people might not know that small area. It's like, oh, well, it's, you know, if you're in Wisconsin, it's like, oh, you're close enough to Madison. We'll say that, you know, it happened in Madison, but it didn't happen in Madison. You know, it might have happened 20 miles away from Madison. So then over time, people are like, oh, this event happened in Madison. And then it's like, they kind of cluster it all up. I think if someone were to like really dig into the data, they might find some of those ones where they didn't actually happen, where they said they did.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the map would change. But I do think there are areas, though, which, you know, weird things do generally tend to occur. But how readily those do occur, I have the slightest idea.
Right. Well, yeah, that's a big well, I was just speaking with what's his name? Jeff Craig, who does the Map in Black project. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's pretty it's mostly Ohio because he's based in Ohio. But he's done West Virginia too, and he's done a big map of the United States, and he's been mapping out these areas. And you know, we were talking about it and just talking about, you know, he's been doing this since I think 2007, maybe before that. And the map, he's getting ready to come out with his fourth edition of the map, and you know, because new things are added or you know what have you. But we were just talking about, he's like, you know, I can't add everything to it. Like it's you know, it's just me doing it. And you know, that's
Right.
another thing. Like this is a big project that takes a lot of time and energy and effort into. And so, you know, until you got, I suppose if you wanted to get a team of people on, I mean, you would just find that it's never ending trying to dig and I think it's important to map these things, but I think that if you really try to dig and make a complete map, you just never could finish it. It just wouldn't.
Well, how many incidences too where like you might have a monster like here, you know, people talk about the Devil's Lake monster at Devil's Lake State Park, but there's also another Devil's Lake farther out west where there's a monster that's said to inhabit it. So which one of those ones predated the other, and which one where they're just like, oh, this is the Devil's Lake they're talking about, so there's a monster in there, when there never was, but then a legend, you know, grew from it. Or
Yeah.
the same thing. How many things are being miscategorized? Like in Lake Tahoe, there's said to be a monster in it, and they call it skinfin. It's kind of like a shark, but the original skinfin story took place in a Lake Tahoe in Florida,
Mm-hmm.
not where, you know, the famous Lake Tahoe is at. but people didn't know that. So then they attributed it to it. So, there's a lot of them that could be a result of that, where someone trying to do research doesn't fully do it, gives it the wrong area. And everyone was like, ooh, well, we have a monster that's close to that too. So let's put it here. And then it builds off of, a mistake to begin with.
Sure. Sure. Well, and then of course marketing as well. I mean, some of these dying cities, and Point Pleasant is the best example of it. They definitely monetize their monsters. And so how much of that could be, for tourism and things like that. So there's a lot
Mhm.
to consider,
Yeah.
with these things. I agree with that. So what do you, I mean, with this institute, and with you, cataloging these things, and of course sharing your opinion, what do you want to accomplish? What's the end game here?
Well, my ultimate goal is to just make sure that these stories aren't lost. Um, I've compiled 3 books now of various newspaper articles for specific categories. The first one, Monsters in Print, is pulling um, these newspaper stories involving monsters
Oh, we haven't even
into.
talked about your books. Gosh, I forgot to mention them. I'm sorry.
No,
Adam
that's
also
completely
writes
fine.
books.
That's completely fine. But the ultimate goal is the same as the website.
Sure.
A lot of these stories, they were written once and they were completely forgotten. And that wasn't the intention of the person who originally wrote them. So I like being able to bring them back in a way where people can be like, I never knew about that. Um, the second one was about ghost, and there's some very obscure ghost stories in there that a lot of people haven't heard, in over 200 years. The most recent one is all about oddities, and it details, just strange across the board. Monsters, freaks of nature, spontaneous combustion, animals raining from the sky, all of that. But again, it's these stories that were written once, faded away into obscurity, and they might not have been read for nearly 200 years. And I don't want that to happen. A lot of people view the Midwest as just the flyover region and nothing goes on here. But there's a lot of strange stuff
Oh
if
yeah.
people would just be willing to look for it, rather than just be like, oh, these are the famous things in this category and we don't need any more.
Sure. Yeah. I
So
I
that's
agree with
that's
that.
the ultimate goal, is for just people to know that weird stuff happens here as well, and for them to possibly tell it later on and keep the stories alive.
Sure. I know. I think that's a good. Has anybody, come out to you and been? I'm sure people have shared their encounters, or their experiences or whatever. Has anybody ever, maybe read something that you had posted, and they were like, oh my God, I thought I was the only one. Maybe they had identified with one of the sightings or anything like that.
There has been people who have read something, they're like, hey, I experienced something similar, or my family experienced something similar. And if I feel it's credible, if it's a credible account, I'll share it on the website. A lot of the times you kind of have to like really dig into what people are saying, and that of course you have to do the research on that
Oh
too.
yeah.
Like, are they just saying it to be part of the history of it, or is there something there? What I really like is, I just recently, I received an email from an environmental scientist who is doing a project with their firm on a river in um, Indiana, or Iowa or Indiana. I can't remember offhand now. I feel bad for it. But
Okay.
they're doing a project on this river where in 1884 there was said to be a battle with a river monster, which involved cannons and the stealing of livestock and people hunting this thing,
Wow.
and they had no idea. So this is another story that was lost. Or like you really had to dig through the state archives and college collections of folklore to find it. But they were working in an area where you know a giant monster was said to have been killed, and they had no idea. And they just wrote to like say thanks, like, hey, thanks for bringing this to our attention. This is so cool. We didn't know. So it's
That's
like
very cool. Yeah.
that. It's like this was, you know, that's I think is the coolest part, when someone's like, I learned something.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. I think that is really neat. Pat, do you have any questions for our guest here?
Yeah, do you have anything specific to my neck of the woods, Chicago? That's not the Mothman, or like, what good stuff do you have from down here?
There is in the most recent book. There's a story that comes to mind in Oddities in Print from the 1800s, which someone believes it's like an early Bigfoot sighting of when one of the rivers, the main rivers through town, was frozen, and they watched this big hairy creature like kill and drag a deer and then chase after some people like on the river.
Wow.
Also, there is one recorded shark attack in Lake Michigan by Chicago.
That's cool.
Yeah,
I guess.
I wrote an article about that one. It's about the Lake Michigan monster. That was a pretty fun one. But yeah, in the global database of shark attacks, there is one shark attack listed for Lake Michigan near Chicago, where it is said a young boy was bit by a shark, and the shark managed to escape. And a legend about the Lake Michigan monster kind of was prevalent for a while, and then it also faded into obscurity.
Were you aware of the Lake Michigan monster resurgence of like maybe 2-3 years ago?
When there was that video where it was like
there was a couple videos, and then somebody had gone around town hanging up flyers looking for information. And I was doing a podcast for Loyola University at the time, and I got to the person the week after Barstool Sports got a hold of him, because Barstool Sports was out of here as well, Chicago. So even though that's not like their beat, they still do like, comedic content throughout the day or whatever. They got a hold of this chick's flyers before I did by a matter of days, and got her story and talked to her and just made a whole fucking joke out of it. And by the time I got a hold of her trying to get her to come on the podcast I was doing for Loyola, she didn't want nothing of it. And I never heard too much more about it.
I remember seeing videos and stuff, but I know some of them were,
the videos were janky, and it was Lake Michigan, but it wasn't Chicago. I want to say some of it was over on the actual Michigan side of things.
It was like a rubber mat caught along.
Yeah, it was
the docks and stuff like that.
The videos never did much for me, but there was a kind of a mini flap of sightings, like just kind of word of mouth stuff, not stuff that was actually like recorded, but people saying, "Oh, I was running alongside the lake and thought I saw something." And this person put out these flyers to collect info, and she was collecting people's stories. People were actually calling her and giving her stories, and then Barstool Sports got a hold of her, and she shut the whole thing down.
See, that's interesting, because I wonder what people were reporting, because the classic depictions of the Lake Michigan monster at the time ranged from, the classic giant serpent to giant fish. Someone reported having an encounter with a monster whale, which kind of knocked around some ships.
Yeah.
So it had a lot of different appearances. And this was, this kind of predated the classic depiction of lake monsters once Nessie got its plesiosaur look after the original King Kong came out, when all lake monsters kind of changed to the dinosaur appearance. So this thing had a whole bunch of different descriptions. So I wonder what people were saying it looked like.
I want to say it was, first of all, I love the whale one. That's if I'm putting money on anything, it's that I want there to be a giant fucking whale down there. But I think it was more of the plesiosaur, long neck, elongated body, giant eel type thing. But I didn't get any of them. I don't know.
Right.
But I remember those two videos that surfaced weren't worth shit either.
I do find it to be extremely interesting. Like, when everyone's perceptions, it's like all lake monsters became, dinosaur-esque. Like,
right.
Once someone starts saying, I saw a dinosaur in this lake, or I saw a plesiosaur in this lake, my mind automatically turns off, because it's like, okay, it's just the main pop culture image. But if someone were to report nowadays, I saw a maned, horse-headed looking serpent come out of the water, it's like, okay, now you're going back to like early 19th century. and you're like, there might be something here because those don't get reported anymore.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's why I tell people my favorite cryptid is Caddy, and so the Caborosaurus, and everybody's like, "What?"
Yep. It's got like that droopy camel face, and
Yeah,
it looks sad.
yeah,
But it's crazy to think that like when you talk about freshwater lake, like, you know, water monsters, yeah, they're all dinosaurs and stuff. But if you were to talk about giant ocean monsters, you know what I mean? It's what are people going to gravitate more towards? Giant squids, you know what I mean, or giant sharks.
yeah.
Well, there was a long flat back in the day where people were describing sea dragons, which look like giant alligators, like just massive marine alligators, and then those slowly transformed into, you know, camel-headed serpents with large eyes that would do battle with ships. But then again, the 1930s rolled around, and you know, with the release of the original King Kong, where people saw, you know, an aquatic dinosaur on screen, and not long after that, like the first dinosaur description of Loch Ness Monster came out, and when the papers ran that, that's what everyone started changing the descriptions to. So, you know, how many of these things no longer get reported because people are looking for the dinosaur appearance and they're not looking for, you know, like a giant monster whale. Like they're like, oh, that's not a monster, that's just a whale. But it's like, but you're not really looking at it. So you're looking at this description that is not possible in the least because it can't do what you're saying it does. But it's very interesting. That's why I love aquatic monsters, because there's so much controversy around them, but there's so much like amazing history to them.
And then if you start, when you start talking about, you know, you're talking about, you know, ocean life, then it kind of, you're like, well, anything goes out there. You know?
Right.
So, but no, it is that, I agree. That is a lot of, I think that's really exciting. I think that the only logical explanation is that they're all shapeshifters, guys. That's what it is.
Everything's an oarfish. Everything is an oarfish.
Do you? So one
those
of the
guys are cool.
You mentioned it kind of in passing, but you have several books that are available on Amazon and through your website, where you kind of go through and you compile some of the first recorded descriptions of these creatures. Have you? And it's kind of it's interesting because, like, obviously from a historical perspective, like you're studying the evolution of, you know, people reporting these things, but it's kind of I would assume from a media standpoint, there's a component of that too, where you're studying the kind of the way that the media changes over the years. Do you see the varied descriptions kind of change throughout the decades as these reports?
Oh yeah.
And I think, isn't that so telling that, like, maybe we really need to, maybe y'all need to, this is what y'all need to go do. Y'all need to go and buy Adam's books, because what he has is before pop culture consciousness takes over and we're all brainwashed into reporting and seeing the same things.
It's funny that, like, the main thing, like, you can really see when the article's being written, whether or not the person writing it believes that there's any truth to it or not. The ones where, you know, they're just looking to fill page space, you know, they will go to lengths to, you know, kind of make fun of the credibility of the witness, or they will poke fun at, well, this town has a, you know, it's known that big drinkers come from this area, or anything like that. They'll throw that in there. But the ones that they don't embellish it, they put just matter of fact what the person who says they saw in there, even if it's, you know, a very short article, they're giving you just the quote unquote facts of it. And you can see this progression where, you know, early on it would be very serious, and then as the years progress, it took on a more joking matter, but then it went back to like a serious tone, and then it ebbs and flows with whether or not they believe it. But some of the early description of what could be described as like Bigfoot, some of them are described in such a way that if you didn't know when they were written, you could swear that, you know, it was written yesterday, not 200 years ago. Well, because they're describing the exact same thing, but they didn't know what to call it. They just said wild man or hairy man or cow man. They would describe them as such too.
It's some of those early newspapers, though, when you think about actually where we were at as a country when those things came out. My wife and I were watching. She watches it. I had sat down and watched 10 minutes of it with her. But like that Tombstone prequel, 1833, and we were talking about settlers, and I'm like, these crazy, not that I'm a white nationalist or anything. People, calm the fuck down. But these crazy fucking Europeans that like got on boats and like came all the way across the fucking ocean and then
Mhm.
got here and then got in wagons and went from one end of the country to the other and fought fucking weather and animals and rivers and Indians and cholera and all kinds of shit to settle this. It's amazing to think that we share the fucking DNA with those people. Because
Mhm.
if you look at how coddled we are now, and it's also interesting to see America being the leader in the space program, because it's that same DNA that propelled all those people back then to get in those boats and come across the ocean and go across the plains and all that shit. That's the same gene that says, all right, you know what, shoot me up into the fucking sky, let's see what happens. You know what I mean?
Right. And
It,
you have a lot of those cases like with those people at that time. It's reported that they saw something and they put a party together to go hunt it. Like
right.
they weren't stopping. They were like, we're going to find this thing. And they try. And the thing, like there's multiple stories. There's one on the Great Lakes up in the UP where this party of hunters, which can only be described as a Bigfoot nowadays, shot this thing and chased it up a tree, and it had no choice, but this thing jumped into Lake Michigan and drowned it itself.
Wow.
Like they couldn't go after it. The dogs chased it to the edge. It was shot. It had no other choice. And they described it as extremely tall, very well built. It did not wear clothes. It was covered in hair and it left big footprints. And
Yeah.
like, it's very fact of the matter. So it's kind of like,
well, yeah, because newspapers back then were like legitimately telling people, like, look, we went another 50 miles that way. This is what we saw. Why are they going to lie? Because things that they came across, they were discovering new things every day. It was a brand new country. There was new threats. There was new dangers. There was new things being discovered all of the time. And these things would have been treated as matter of factly as a pack of wild wolves or a herd of buffalo or something. It was just another element of nature that we had to contend with.
Oh yeah, because they'd put a story in there like Farmer Johnson down the road had his chicken coop broken into by a bear, or a herd of cow was killed by a mountain lion, and then you'd get the one that's like the what is it, the root cellar out back was broken into by a giant unknown creature. It's kind of like they're not gonna. Some of them they might embellish. You have to really look into what paper you're kind of reading. But a lot of them, it's like they're gonna describe the monster as well as they would as they were describing a bear.
Right.
Like they're letting people know that something weird happened and just be on guard.
Mm-hmm.
My problem, I think a big problem. I think the biggest problem in America now is that there's not enough of these like hunting parties anymore. You know what I mean? Don't you miss those?
Baby, you're poking the bear. Stop it.
That's everybody.
I was telling you before the
his,
show started, I was telling Ashers about a proposed Milwaukee trip with me and fellow D-list celebrity Mike Vanderbilt, and I was gonna honestly turn it into a working trip, and one day we were gonna have to go and maybe do some Beast of Bray Road hunting.
Hunt some monsters. Oh yeah, you got to join in on that fun. No, I love that. So those are some of my favorite stories when they get the the people together and they try to take it out Frankenstein style. I like that. Anyway,
what was what? Hold on, just real quick while we're talking about ancient newspapers and shit. What was the Thunderbird story though that you knew was fake? That like you were talking about? Ashers, you had it was in it wasn't Tombstone, Arizona.
The Tombstone photograph,
yeah.
The Thunderbird photograph.
Yeah, now that was legitimately faked, or like
what's the deal with that? Was fake. The article, it's hotly debated whether or not the article was actually real or if it was a piece of yellow journalism.
Wow,
that's and what age was take. What year was that?
The mid to late 1800s. I want to say somewhere between 1850 and 1889. but don't quote me on that. I'm not entirely sure offhand.
Right. So, like, when going, and I know that, tonight's topic isn't necessarily hoaxes, but what do you think the motivation is at that point to start hoaxing shit? Just to sell papers, or just for a goof? Or, I mean,
Yeah, a lot of it could be a way to bring people to live in your town. If you're going to be bringing in a bunch of people to go searching for a monster, they're going to need places to stay. So the local hotels would make a lot of money. The local shops would make a lot of money. They might bring in so many people that they'd have to, eventually build a railroad there. It becomes a stop. People start setting up businesses.
and
Anything.
how do we know that was faked?
The Thunderbird, the photo.
Yeah.
So there's an, and this is where it becomes really fun. So the story goes on. So originally the story talks about two cowboys who are out, and they were essentially, this bird was like kind of chasing them, but they ended up chasing the bird. They shot it, and it was described almost like a dragon, kind of like how you would think a pterosaur would be
Hmm.
described. And they talked about how they left it there, but they cut off a part of it to bring it back into town to prove that it happened, and they were going to go back and get it later. Some point along the way, someone started talking about how they brought it back, and they ended up taking a photo of it. And this isn't the only one that they saw. They saw and they killed another one. And they described how this photo was taken. This photo was never seen, though. This was a big thing in papers at that time. They would describe a photo being taken. They would describe a drawing being made, a sketch, anything like that. They would never show it, though. So that was one of the aspects of it. You have to really dive into whether or not it's true or false, because they might have done it, they just didn't have the means to reproduce that image in their paper, depending on where they were at. So they're
Right.
talking about this photo. Later on, then people start saying that, oh, I remember being a kid and I saw in a magazine or a book that Thunderbird photo, and I remember being younger and flipping through an old book and seeing a Thunderbird photo. And then, but I could never remember it. So what I saw was either, some recreation for the book, or, a drawing or whatever, but I remember seeing it, and it kind of set up that that Mandela effect kind of in your mind, where you're like, I swear this is how it was. So, and then later on, a picture actually showed up, and it shows like a bunch of men standing in front of a barn with like a pterodactyl or a pterosaur nailed to this barn. But no one like gave any info on where it came from. So everyone's like, this is legit. This is the actual photo. But then another one came out, a bunch of Civil War soldiers standing around this giant pterosaur. And everyone's saying this is real, but that turned out to be a hoax. So where this photo actually came from, no one knows, but everyone can kind of agree it doesn't fit the timeline on when this actual story was written. But it's kind of gone down in history as like a major piece of this puzzle.
So the story is probably legit, right? Because the story,
in a way, yes.
But somewhere in the 80s and 90s or whatever, people started looking for photos that they couldn't find, so they made their own. So the photo you see associated with it is BS, but the story itself, all right, that makes me feel better. I thought that it was faked back. I thought it was hooked back in the 1800s. And I was like, why would they do that back then? But no, that's not what happened at all. Well, yeah, I mean, it could have been a bullshit story from the start. No, I believe cowboys were out there fighting dinosaurs. That's the world I want to live in. Right? You know what I mean? That's the reality I subscribe to. Okay, yes. When cowboys headed west, they had to take down pterodactyls all the fucking time.
One of the tropes, though, about like papers at that time is they would always end it on a cliffhanger, and there was always, it was one of like three of them. One of them, the first one was always the Smithsonian got involved, And they're like, we'll follow up after the Smithsonian has the results.
People still say that now. That's
Yeah.
still a very popular claim. Anyway,
I
go
bet
ahead.
that place is like the warehouse in Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's got to be.
They, which reminds me, after this, remind me to tell you my movie idea.
Oh God.
They,
Okay.
But
Yeah.
the Smithsonian would always get involved and they would take the thing and it would disappear. That was always like number one. Number two is the thing that they killed was too big. They were too far away from civilization. So they took a part of it or they marked the location to go back later. They never did a follow up. Three, it was put in some general store or pharmacy for people to come see it. But then the person, like takes it out of the window and there was some tragedy, like the building burned down or they got robbed and the thing was stolen.
Or it rotted and then they didn't preserve it and they were in the middle of fucking Arizona and it just,
Right. So it always ends like that. And it's like they never do any follow-up. So they make you think that, oh, maybe the next issue will have it. So then you buy the paper and they get more money. Like, and then once that's run its course, they'll run another monster story. Whether that one is true or not, they got you hooked because they keep telling you they're going to give you an update and they never give you an update.
Yeah. It's just it's marketing is what it is. Well, what do you think about the fact that people think that, I'm sorry, I got to go back to the Thunderbird photograph. I would like to believe that it's out there. And that's me. That's my bias. But what do you think about the fact that people say that they didn't see it in a book, but they had seen it when Ivan Sanderson showed it on TV in on a I think a Canadian talk show it was?
I am not aware of that.
Yeah, oh yeah, Sanderson owned this photo. Was very public about owning it, and a lot of people say that they remember seeing it because he was on a talk show. You know, I'll talk to you about it afterwards. It's a little project I'm undertaking, but yeah, that's something that we'll talk about it some more. Maybe the magic will stay alive a little bit for you. But I had a hot tip from somebody that says that the photograph is actually sitting at a teeny tiny settlers museum in Texas, and that
I've heard those too, that it's at a little museum in the South, and it's not publicly noted, but whenever someone's like asked to provide a picture of it,
there's never any.
There's never a picture, or it's always an excuse of, oh, the museum won't let me take photos, or I didn't have my phone at the time, or my camera, or they just stop responding. It's the classic. It's the classic. I got a hot piece of information for you, and then you will never hear from me again.
And that's what I said. I'm like, well, where is this museum at? Because like, I will fucking jump on a plane tomorrow and go there if it means that I can prove that this photograph exists. I will. I'll do it. And they've never disclosed that information. So I'm going to ask them again because it's someone that I talk to regularly. But but it could be. It very well could be sitting in a little settlers museum that's just kind of a part of a little park somewhere that, just nobody really visits or pays attention to.
Or it's like, one of the early copies of the Declaration of Independence. Someone took it, they hid it behind like a photo that's hanging in someone's kitchen, and they don't know that this piece of crypto history is packed behind like a really bad oil painting.
Well, and that's what Sanderson said, was that he gave the photograph to a family member of one of the men that shot this thing, and he never disclosed who it was. So I don't know.
Interesting.
Sanderson's not really the type of guy that would make those kinds of claims, but maybe, I don't know. Anyway, we'll talk about it more. I think you'll find it. I think you'll be interested. But yeah. So anyway, that's always a fun story to talk about. I think it's probably one of the most well known. When I think of like old articles, and I try to think about reading through all these old articles, it gets kind of grating. Sometimes because it's a lot of the same. Again, they're going to post an update. There's no follow up, or there's no pictures because pictures weren't much of a thing then, or what have you. I refer people to like the old postcards. You know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
And like the origins of the jackalope and stuff like that. Because that's really those are really good. I mean, that's a really good indicator of the times, I suppose, and kind of what media was like then. And it's fast information that you can get that I feel like is engaging to the average person who, maybe you don't like to read, or maybe you don't like to comb over all the articles, or, whatever it is. I highly recommend looking up old timey postcards.
Oh yeah, some of them are fantastic. The imagery that they put on there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they really are. And some I mean they look really great. But and then we've had mock-ups since then, in recent times that have just been like the one with the grasshopper. I'm sure you've seen the one with the giant grasshopper.
Yeah.
And but I don't think that was an old-timey one. I'm pretty sure that was an old picture that somebody had edited later on. But even then, it was probably early 2000s when someone did it. I mean, so the technology's been there for a while for people to kind of, you know, kind of feed fuel into the fire of these hoaxes or these old-timey, these folk tales, basically. That's definitely a good indicator there. But yeah, that's what I got. So what are you doing? What are you working on now? What's next?
Um, because the most recent book is done, I'm back to doing individual articles a month about a deep dive into a strange subject. That'll go on until an idea really takes hold for another big project. I do have something stirring around. Kind of holding it close to the chest right now because the minute I say it, then I like hold myself to a timeline and I hate doing that. So it's like, I'll work on it whenever I feel like it. But as of right now, it's just a lot of deep dives into strange incidences and stories. The most recent one I did was the ghost elephant of Baraboo. Did a nice deep dive into that Wisconsin legend. Doing one now about Lake Huron. So just random Midwest stuff across the board.
Sure. Okay. Well, where can people find all these things?
All of this can be found at pinebarrensinstitute.com. From there, it's like links to Instagram, Twitter, the shop. Just that's the main hub. You won't really find anything on Facebook. I tell people that straight up. Facebook is kind of a wasteland when it comes to what I want to do. So I keep stuff off of there.
Sure. That's okay. That's all right. Pat, did you have anything else to add before we close?
No, I'm good. I can't wait to talk about all the things you guys want to talk about off air. I'm excited. It's going to
all
be
the super secret stuff.
Right. Like, let's get to that shit. Yeah.
Oh, can I say my movie idea before?
I didn't know if that was part of your... Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's pitch movie ideas.
I want to, it could be a movie or like a series or anything, but I want it to follow around a new employee of the Smithsonian who was sent out to bring all of this stuff back, but has to then cover it up that it did not happen. Like there's a Thunderbird that was shot, go out and get it, but then try and convince people that it wasn't that. But it's set in like the 1900s. And it's like they're after giants, they're after Thunderbirds, dead Bigfoot, strange monsters, all of that.
Well, you have an elder, you have Bruce Campbell, who's been doing this for the past 30 years, training his replacement, who's a young woman. And,
already sold on Bruce Campbell.
Yeah, Bruce Campbell. That's all.
As they go to different parts of the country, he could kind of. Did you remember the Adventures of Briscoe County Jr.? I thought of that when you brought it up right away. It was a Bruce Campbell cowboy show that was ran for like a season or two, and it had some weird sci-fi elements. But yeah, you have Bruce Campbell as the elder statesman. You have a plucky young archaeologist from the university that's been picked to take his place, and he introduces her into the world. And in different towns, he can have different companions. Obviously, we'll bring in some Native Americans or something.
Just imagine an episode where it's like it's about the Thunderbird incident, and they're like, "Hey, they shot this Thunderbird. Go get it." Then they go get it, and they're like, "Did you get the photograph?" I'm like, "What photograph?" And they have to go back out and then find it. And they're God.
Well, and that's just the monster of the week shit. The overall plot line for season 1, or maybe even the whole series, has to be what the fuck is in the Grand Canyon.
Oh, that hidden temple down there.
Yeah, or whatever we want to have down there. We could have a UFO down there. We could have Noah's Ark down there. You know what I mean?
I need to ask because there's a lot of people who don't know what I'm talking about. I know I didn't dream this. Does anyone remember the story of the person who found that strange temple inside the Grand Canyon with weird statues. And then eventually they like the government, you can't go in that area anymore.
Yes. I've been listening to Coast for so long. I've heard so many Grand Canyon stories. I mean, I don't know which one specifically you're talking about, but everything you just said rang true to me on some level.
It's like they're climbing. It's on the side. There's not a path to it. You have to like scale your way down, but there was an opening and it looked like there was carvings that looked like Egyptian and Aztec. Right. And there was like giant thrones inside this giant room inside the canyon. Yes. And it's like they reported it and like the government's like, nope, this area is off limits. And it's like they've been trying to get back to it ever since.
Well, that's what a lot of people. So let's talk about that for a second. If there was evidence of a giant civilization in prehistory America, why would the government want to suppress that knowledge? Is it because they just, at the time, it was so confusing to them, they didn't know what they had, and they didn't want to let it out? You know what I mean? It was going to be too world-changing too quick? Or is it because it's, like your idea about the Smithsonian, a concerted effort to suppress knowledge of X, and we know what X is? Or is X just a variable that everything that we can't automatically explain at first find, then we need to suppress it until we can explain it? Because if you think about it, if you talk about a nationally run scientific institute, wouldn't it do that with any new evidence that popped up? I mean, like, we can't just we're not just going to release everything to the public the minute we find it, right?
Right. I think it's more along the way I think of it as, they trying to get people to come over to what would eventually be North America. They wanted to get people on the side of the ruling party and the like the church that was in control of certain areas, things like that. So for them to be like, oh, don't be scared, there's nothing wrong here. Oh shit, we found these giant bones. Don't let anyone know. They're going to panic. They're going to leave. And then it got to the point where it's just like, we're too deep now. We can't let people know we lied to them from the beginning or we're going to lose their trust. They're not going to do what we say anymore. So we have to keep this under wraps forever. Type of thing. It's like they went with the lie and they got way too into it and they could never reverse course.
Well, in any case, I think that makes the perfect big bad for your Smithsonian idea, because yes, for the most part, they spend their time, taking trains from state to state, chasing down thunderbirds and lake monsters and whatever. But there's this bigger picture of the Grand Canyon and what's in that temple and everything and what that means. And, just because you're let in on this level doesn't mean that you're ready to be let in. You don't know all the secrets,
right.
And there's stuff that's still, and you see the information slowly being fed to the new recruit. Bruce Campbell's slowly kind of introducing the new recruit into the fold, but there's stuff that he doesn't even know. And he's been with it from the beginning. There's been stuff that he's been shut out of. So it's this whole, the beginning of secrecy and conspiracy and all this stuff. I think it's a great idea.
That's what you can call it. The beginning of secrecy.
Right.
I like when it's Bruce Campbell. That sells me for sure.
Yeah. I think you got to pitch it as a Netflix series or something, because it's a period piece. So it's going to be expensive. You're not going to shoot the shit with your friends, but
for sure. If you guys want to get in on this, I will gladly do this as a team.
Let's do it. Yeah.
I will spitball ideas with you all night long.
I think this is
we
awesome.
Just probably should record ourselves and then put it out there, because we probably already said enough to have our shit stolen.
That's true. That's true. You better hurry up and do it.
Oh, whatever.
This summer.
I want to watch it. I don't want to have to work on it. I just
right.
I would rather just fast forward 3 years and be able to sit on my couch and watch this shit.
When the thing they got to bring back is too large, they create a circus around it, and they're like, "Oh, we're going to charge people to see 10 cents, and when we get close enough to Washington, then it disappears forever."
That's so accurate. Oh, that's so accurate. That's funny as fuck. No, I would be totally down. I would. Yeah, let's do this. Let's make a movie, guys.
The Netflix show, but
Oh, I'm sorry. Let's make it. That's right. You're right. It's
we're just putting together a package. We're selling the idea to someone else. We're not
well,
filming.
well,
What do you think?
gotta
I'm going to shoot this with my iPhone?
Yeah, I'll shoot it with mine.
Yeah.
I'll throw mine in too.
Yeah,
Right.
So
we can all use. We got 3
We got a
iPhones
camera crew now, and we'll have
on a gimbal.
and hold the boom mic, and Tobias will hold the clapper, and we'll film this thing up in Janesville, and
got a whole crew. We can
Emily can do the poster for it. So yeah, you're right. Yeah, we got a whole crew.
Someone's got to at Bruce Campbell on Twitter to see if he's got anything going on.
He would do it. That's the thing is that I don't think it would be hard to get Bruce Campbell involved. I think he would be like, yeah.
I bet if you promised to kill him at the end of the first season, he would do it. Seriously, he'd probably be like, all right, yeah, and then you give me a death scene, you're not going to, and it'll be a little bit of a dramatic turn for him, and give him.
And then I never have to commit to this again.
Right, you do it for one season, and we'll bring you back. I mean, come on, we'll figure something out if you really want to do it again.
We got to bring in notable people at the time too. Like, I want to see an appearance by Robert Ripley, who's like, they're going to him for like, have you ever seen anything like this? And he's like, yeah, I can spin it around though, and I can make it seem fake.
I think that's a good
idea.
idea.
You could do a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen of the Old West or something.
Oh my God.
You could do like, I'll bring in fucking what's his name, Swearingen. We'll figure out a way to have Deadwood in this. You know what I mean? Like, why not? We're gonna combine Deadwood and Tombstone and what's the other good old Western shit? I don't know.
Well, anyway, maybe you guys want to crowdfund this. I don't know. Well,
get P.T. Barnum in there too, because he was a notable shyster as well.
Yeah, none of that the Greatest Showman bullshit. I mean, come on now. What was that about? Remember that? Everybody was so up. I don't know. You know what? Everybody was like, oh my God, have you seen The Greatest Showman? I'm like, yeah, it's bullshit.
I'm still going to ask Hugh Jackman to do it just because. That'd be awesome.
He might do it. Oh, I'll play P.T. Barnum again? Sure. All right. Well, with that there, let us know what you guys think. Would you watch something like this? Of course you would. You fucking listen to the show. You'd watch
it. If you made it to this point in the show,
right?
you drank the Kool-Aid on all our fucking ideas. You're definitely watching the show. Honestly, if you've listened to this point in this episode, you would probably end up being in it because you're probably somebody that knows us very well that we're actually friends with.
That's not true.
In real life.
Whatever. I love every single one of you. Just the people that have listened up to this point. The rest, everybody else that didn't listen up to this point.
You just pretend to like them when you run into them, but the people that are listening right now, you really like them.
I really do like them. Yeah.
If you listen to this point, tweet this specific word: purple pies.
Purple pies. That's it. If you listen to this point, purple pies. That's the passcode. Oof. I don't know what you get, but that's the passcode. You get
a part in the show.
It's true. You get a part in the show and my undying love. So
and that is worth $1,200 from what I've heard. Street value.
Exactly $1,200. That's right. All right. Well. Okay, I'm going to close this thing. I think we're done here. Anybody that's listening to the show, obviously go check out Adam and all the stuff that he does. Go buy his books so that we can make this movie with the money that you spend on his books. And, of course, learn you some stuff about some things in the Midwest. And
the progression of media,
exactly.
Not just about the paranormal. Look at it as a study in media and how journalism progressed throughout the ages.
You gotta have, you have to be aware of all the hats in order to work in this field. We're just that great. So
yep.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for coming on. I'm sure we can have you back again at some point.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
Absolutely. Well, until then, guys, we'll see you back here next Wednesday.